Welcome to Altvia's Preferred Return Podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Williams. Today I'm with Harold Klett, SVP Global Services here at Altvia. Harold, thanks for joining me, man. You joined the company in July of this year.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, it's. I think I'm coming up on 3 months just as we speak here. So great to be here and honored to be on your podcast.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Thing I'm going to say about you, Harold, is when I got a chance to interview you, as you were considering coming to work here, and we did a remote interview. First off, you're in the Cape, yeah?
Yep, Cape Cod.
We'll talk about how you got there. But we did a remote Zoom interview, much like this one. And I got to say, I left the conversation sort of feeling like, whoa, you were like, you and I have been living, in many ways, pretty parallel paths, doing similar things at different companies in this market. And then all of a sudden our paths crossed, and it was sort of interesting to be talking to you. So I want to dig into that. But maybe on that note, tell us a little bit about your career, man. Where'd you start and where'd you go and how'd you get there?
Yeah. It's been a long and interesting ride so far. So, actually started in with a small startup company based out here on Cape Cod. Um, and I started in the services organization. I was the first support engineer. And we were selling. I've been in enabling technology most of my career, all of my career. So software, hardware, technology. This company was selling into the telecommunications space. So it started there. Geez, almost 30 years ago, and we grew that company up from. I was probably in the first 30 employees. We grew that up to about 500 people, and through multiple acquisitions went public. And then we were acquired by Lucent Technologies at the end of the 90s. So I headed up all of their services. So we had deployment services, training, tech pubs, implementation, all of that. And then I took the opportunity to move into engineering as we went into Lucent Technologies. So ran engineering for a bit there, and then moved into product management with our SoftSwitch organization, and ran that, learned a lot about the market, about the clients, and then ultimately we spun back out of Lucent and went through a variety of acquisitions, and hence was acquired after that. I ran product for the new organization, and then I ran the service provider business for a company called Dialogic that was in the telecom equipment space. The company I started with was Excel Switching. And about 10 years ago now, left Dialogic, was really looking to get into fintech, into SaaS, get more exposure into the enterprise markets. And I left there. I moved to Intralinks, which is in our space as well, and went there to really form their professional services organization and custom engineering solutions in a variety of different verticals, including alternatives, as well as banking and M&A. And so we ran, grew that business, did a whole bunch of different solutions there. And Intralinks was acquired by SS&C a few years after that. And there was an opportunity for me to move into the SS&C organization and run the professional services and support for their alternative assets products. And this is kind of where some of our paths cross, right? Is those products really were, more back office, a bit of back office, and then some middle office and front office. Fund accounting software, mostly private equity and hedge funds, some real assets as well, and an LP portal as well, serving the GP LP relationships from those systems and the interconnection from those systems. So spent a good amount of time there, also with our fund admin business, supporting that business as well. And then recently, this past spring, had the opportunity to meet with Altvia and decided to left SS&C and came over and joined the Altvia team, and we're on our way.
Indeed. There's a lot in there. We were talking just before we started the tape about DSP and audio processing and stuff. And So going back to all the way to Excel switching in 1994. What was going on with DSP? I'm personally curious because we're going to get to this. You and I have spoken before. We both enjoy music. You two are a musician. One of the things that I'm fascinated by these days is what some of the sort of hardware companies and even companies that have been around a long time, like from the 50s and stuff, like Universal Audio, which made studio hardware equipment and stuff, what they're doing now with the ability to bring basically all this, legacy studio recording equipment into like these little boxes that are loaded with DSP processing and apply models of effects and signal processing and all have it, sort of run real time because it's offloaded from your computer and stuff. So the topic of DSP is a massive one. I'm kind of curious what your take on DSP is.
Yeah. Well, so back back when I started with that startup company, it was really about bringing media rich applications into the telecom networks that didn't exist before, right? You had switching, you made phone calls, it wasn't that interesting, and then you really wanted to bring in things like conferencing, central office voicemail, applications that ISVs and OEMs would create and then bring to the telecom networks because they didn't inherently exist. So really about taking rich media and putting it into those networks. As that evolved over time into IP-based networks and IP media processing and things of that sort, video comes into the equation and audio mixing and different types of manipulating the audio and overlaying it on the video. And so as we moved into sort of soft switches and media servers, that all came in. So DSPs, it's interesting from a standpoint of not just the hardware pieces, but what's being done in software as well today, right? And just actually getting sort of rich media and combining that at a very high quality and high quality output, and being able to mix that and do that real time in many cases.
A lot of stuff we take for granted, yeah. So it is in high technology, yeah. Um, I want to go back and talk about music for a minute, but before we do, I want you to kind of lay out a little bit of your role here. So I mentioned your SVP Global Services. I know what that means. What what does that mean for others, and especially for any customers we have that are listening? Love to kind of help them understand exactly where you're at and what you're up to.
Yeah, no, great. Because I have been in the service organizations most of my career, and it's all really about wrapping around our customers and their experience and their objectives, and making sure that we're doing all those things that are necessary to make them successful and create a really good partnership between Altvia and our clients, because it starts there. So my organization is global services, but we really start from the point of the beginning of the relationship, onboarding and implementing our software in partnership with our partners, and running through the support after we've done that. And also, we have a technical account management capability that we can talk further about overlaying as they're evolving and their business needs change. Really working with them side by side in their organizations about achieving those goals and managing the software. So really runs the gamut from sort of beginning to end. We can drill down, I think, in various areas. I'd love to talk through sort of what we do in each of those areas and how that kind of benefits the clients, because in some cases it's pretty unique in the industry.
Yeah, no, for sure. Let's do. So maybe we'll start there because I do want to kind of use that. You've obviously worked in organizations that are omnipresent in this market, and yet just there the comment of it's really pretty different. Explain that.
Mm-hmm. So I guess I'll take two legs to that stool. One of which is just Altvia as a company and its culture and how we go about um, engaging with our clients. Because one of the reasons I came here was really to get back to that sort of startup environment where we're very closely paired and really understand our customers and their needs are and how to make them successful. And that kind of underlies really how everybody engages. And from my team's perspective, really starting with the implementation, you know, I'll say it's a little bit, different in the respect of we really go into it. The software is incredibly powerful. And we used to say back where I worked before, the good news is something's programmable. Bad news is it's programmable, right? It can be everything to anybody or nothing. You really want to make sure it's really easy to use and that people get the value out of it. And so in the first steps of the implementation is really about sitting down and saying, what are we trying to achieve? How do you run your business? How do we fold into that to make sure that you achieve the efficiencies you want, that you're actually getting the benefit and getting the benefit quickly out of the software and then moving forward. So we really take the approach of, getting, the information into the system and get hands-on keyboards quick to get value immediately out of the system. And then look at how are we tailoring that to their needs? Any custom objects, custom fields, data that they have that they're tracking that maybe others don't. Maybe it's unique to their business. We really take a data first kind of view at that, um, and get that into the system. But then there's another piece on the data front on implementation. We ultimately are working with people that have different spreadsheets and other systems and other things that all this data is coming out of, and a lot of times it's disparate data, it's overlapping, and we're able to actually provide data services to bring that in, map that data, bring that data into the system, clean it up, and get them really where they need to be effectively day one. And I think the next piece that we really focus on is really how do you unleash that data, right? So the business intelligence of it with some of the technology that we use, really data's in the system, it's being managed, it's being reported on, but then how do you actually expose that in such a way that you can actually run your business and achieve results? And what's unique, I think, with how we do that is we're really lockstep, with them. We understand their business. It's not about just implementing our software. It's really about understanding their business and how to implement a solution that works for them.
Yeah, you and I were talking about the data thing. It's interesting because if there's one step of the process, well, everybody agrees, right? That data is super key, and nobody wants to have to rekey in all this data that they've already got somewhere. So it's a logical, thing to bring with you. And yet, if there were like one step that the people might understand, and I'm sort of projecting and painting with a broad brush, but like many people in our market that we interact with and customers and stuff are really good with Excel. And it's like, oh, if you need a shopping mall, I'll build one in Excel kind of thing. And so, the thought of, okay, well, we'll take this data and sort of, if it were me, I'm one of these people. It's like throw it into a pivot table and, start deduping it and doing whatever else you will with it. The data is so key. And I think, you highlighted our data onboarding experience is extremely different. And took me a minute to kind of really see inside the yogurt machine and understand that. But the stuff that we're able to do quickly and the stuff we're able to catch that you don't know about, right? So you kind of need like a programmatic way to turn up like, oh, well, this, here are some sort of flags about the data and stuff like that you should be aware of, because it's one thing to know what you're looking for and go find it. But what our team does with data is really pretty exceptional. And not a ton of people really get to see in the hood, especially not the prospects that we're talking to till they get into the experience. But yeah, I mean, what would you say about the sort of novelty of what we do there?
Oh, I mean, I think you said it right. Is a lot of people don't see that and don't understand the complexity of that, and actually the implications of it, right? Of what's done behind the curtain. And so to be able to actually, do that and start with a pristine set of data, right? As you're implementing some of our tools to deal with the deal pipeline, to deal with investor relations, we're able to do that very quickly. If we have had clients that go off and try to clean that themselves, right? And obviously you want it as clean as possible, and we work in partnership to understand what that is. But in some cases that means hiring an Excel guru to go do that for you, or having people that have a day job go off and clean up data, right? We really can get in there and help do that with some of our tools that make it very quick to say, here's where the duplicates are. Here's where we need to merge things in the system, get the data in very quickly.
Indeed. One of the other things that I know people have appreciated over the years of building the business is the people element goes through and through. And I think, a lot of companies say this, especially in this geographic area near Boulder with a bunch of startups. It's like, culture's so important. And, the definition of culture is well beyond the scope of this podcast. It's been discussed in many other places much more thoroughly. So, it's different for each place. But, I think that one thing people have asked me over the years is, how do you define the culture? And I typically go to some sort of basic definition of, like, it's a bunch of people who just genuinely want to help. Like, they didn't, necessarily, maybe some of them came here for jobs. And then they discovered perhaps very early in their career that they really like solving a problem for people, and that becomes more fulfilling than just simply a job. Now, this isn't just me or the employees that feel this way. We routinely hear this from customers, and that's a big sort of strategic weapon for us to win new customers, especially when they talk to customers of ours and we don't even introduce them and they say, oh yeah, it's great and all that stuff. This is really the team that does that. And it starts with, the relationship, I suppose, starts with like sales, but then it, immediately kind of gets into the nitty gritty with this team, but all the way through to support, and I don't want to lose sight of that, because the implementation is just a small, sort of window of time on the spectrum of a customer relationship. The support one is far longer and ongoing, and we love the team. The customers love the team. It's a amazing part of the business. It still exists very organically today, and the culture is very strong there.
Yeah, no, our support team is amazing, right? And you said it, like, when the implementation is done, the relationship doesn't stop there. A lot of times people are like, okay, you're up and running, go for it, right? But business needs change. People need, get new people on board, need to be trained. There's new fields, new metrics have to be taken a look at, new dashboards that have to be created. And really, our approach is to really look across all of that and understand that everything changes. The beauty of the solution is that it can be tailored to those changes. And so when we actually hand off through implementation, our CSMs are there, day one through that, to have relationships with our clients to manage those. The support organization gets brought in so they understand how it was implemented and how the clients are using it. And they can then assist our customers in, adding new reports, in doing some administration of the system, in training, things of that sort. So the support organization, they're very, very responsive, very caring. And I think, like you said, that culture piece, going back to it, one of the main reasons I came, I talked about starting in this startup years ago. And it was very much that type of a culture, which was everybody doing what was necessary to make our customers exceed, because if they did, we did, right? And everyone, had a piece of that. And it's rare to find that in the industry. And I found that Altvia, and the team is really, really, really plugged in. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah. So lucky. That's not hard, or it's not easy to do, to keep that sort of culture going. And a lot of it, like I mentioned, is sort of organic, and people sort of take it with them and do what they may with it. And it evolves very beautifully. And yet the sort of core of it remains. So it's super cool. We're very fortunate to have folks that are good stewards of that. You mentioned this TAM, what we're calling TAM, and that's an acronym for Technical Account Management. That's a bit of an extension of all of these things. So I guess, in a way, the market and our customers have told us that, the sort of services and the folks that we have on the team are so helpful and so good that there must be ways to get even more of them. And so, this is a very popular offering as of late. and it's been discussed a little bit on the podcast before. Let's hear your take on technical account management, Tam. How would you describe it?
Yeah, I would describe, and it's really really taken off. And like you said, is I kind of look at it as our customers having the ability to take our most knowledgeable senior people and have them working for them on their staff for various types of activities and projects. And a little bit different than, say, a project where you scope it out and you satisfy that maybe through implementation or consulting. The technical account managers really are assigned to that customer, right? And they get really in there. They understand how the system works, how the customer does their job, and they become the trusted advisor to do solution architecture of the system, be able to do some administration of the system, manage things like data that comes in and how that should be populated in, give advice as to how best to optimize it given some of the business changes that happen. So really, I look at that as you take a member of Altvia with all of the knowledge, not only of the system, but really our most senior folks that have knowledge of the industry, and have them work side by side with your resources, kind of like a managed service in many respects. We've called it that sometimes, the technical account managers, but really tied to the success of the business.
Yeah. For some reason, I was just as you were saying that with this construct, it's a well-known framework from which the concept of blind spots comes, and it's basically a 2x2 grid, and the basics of it are like what you see on one axis, and then on the other what the rest of the world sees, and or what you don't see, or what the rest of the world doesn't see. And so there is this intersection of the things you don't see that the rest of the world does, which are your blind spots. There's also what you see and the rest of the world does, and that's sort of obvious. But I guess I was just thinking about this in the within that construct, and it sort of was like, man, imagine what's possible, right? Like under the sort of traditional customer relationship, it's sort of like, well, as soon as you know what it is we can help you with, let us know. And by all accounts, that customers love that. We're extremely helpful in doing that. I think what TAM does is it starts to open up the rest of that grid and to say, hey, there might be things you're not even thinking of that I can see or that I'm thinking of, and which could be opportunities for us to do something ultimately that starts to kind of all funnel down towards this use of data and technology and a strategic, differentiated, kind of weaponized way. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Because TMC, they've got a lot of experience. They see a lot of different ways of doing things, and also understand where the evolution of the product is going and some of the capabilities that are there that can be brought to bear. We have many examples where our customer felt that it was going to be a very arduous effort for them to track a new asset or a new type of asset, and the TAM just sat down and said, this is how best practice is, and this is what we've seen, and implemented it very very quickly.
Yeah. I want to go back to the career. So Intralinks, I'm just kind of scrolling through here. 2014 to 2019. Obviously, that was some sort of ride. You mentioned towards the end there that Intralinks, of course, was acquired by SS&C. What was your time at Intralinks like? I largely consider Intralinks to have created one of the product categories I'm obsessed with, and was a heavy part of my obsession with it too, because for me, it all started, probably 14, 15 years ago or so, generally feeling like the way that information was disseminated from GPs to LPs in this market was probably not going to continue to be that way forever, right? It was a little archaic. And thanks to Interlinks, who kind of created the idea of this becoming digital anyway, was in large part a leader that helped forge this. But at the same time, the custom and the tradition at that time was to mostly sort of just log into Interlinks and get a bunch of documents, and that was the specific thing that I felt was likely to change. So, you can't really talk about what we're trying to do in terms of empower GPs and their relationships with LPs by using technology data to sort of really kind of supercharge that relationship and differentiate yourself. You can't really talk about that without mentioning Intralinks. What was it like to be on the ride there?
No, and Intralist is a great company. Like you said, it started in a professional services organization. At that point, it was primarily sort of M&A focused with onboarding enablement, and we really sought to kind of expand that across various verticals in the alternatives in life sciences at the time, and some other verticals as well. And went down the path of looking at what I'll say custom solutions, but unique solutions were necessary in those areas. And one of the things that really, shaped the direction there was around, the focus on that GPLP relationship, not just a sort of secure transmission of documents, but securely facilitating a relationship around those documents and the data. And so, spent a good amount of time building that organization and the ability to deal with APIs and customization to deliver on that promise. And then ultimately, that they moved beyond that to some of the product offerings they have today, which is great.
Cool. And then you go on to SS&C, and I know because you and I have talked about this, but worked very closely with TNR, everyone's favorite accounting product. And if you know, as the kids these days say. But if you don't, TNR is the next round, which was, I guess I don't know a ton about the origin, but my first encounter with TNR was probably in 2005, 2006. I went to work at Greenspring Associates. At the time, many don't know, this is a trivia question, Montague Newhall Associates was the name. In any case, young new investment analyst, and worked with one of my colleagues, Lindsay. Shout out to Lindsay. As she was implementing TNR. And, I never really interacted too much with it, but you just heard TNR all the time back then. And it was as if to suggest it had, anything and everything. And then I started to more regularly kind of get, data downloads and exports and stuff of data from TNR, and it was great. So, I think there were, a complaint here and there about the sort of resources it took on your local machine with the server and stuff like that. But what's your take on TNR? You worked with it closely. It must be a bit of a baby of sorts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, so I was responsible for implementation and support of TNR and a couple of other alt asset products. I want to be in total return and some other ones in there. But TNR as a product is very, very robust capability set, right? I think the clients that are on it, love it. As with anything, there's always things that can be improved and expanded upon, and they continue to do that. I think since the time that you were on it, and like we talked about when we crossed paths, is I was supporting your prior company and many things. So it is a very small world, right? But a really good, following using the software. A little bit different than sort of the space we're in today. Really, the fund accounting back end software in the private equity space, but there was limited sort of capabilities related to expansive CRM or managing other relationships, which is sort of better served alongside that as well.
What makes private equity accounting so hard? I mean, I think, I largely view accounting providers in this market as, and just up until recently, it was sort of like all these, mostly incumbents that had been around for some time, and the underlying infrastructure and technology wasn't necessarily super modern, which the flip side of that coin is a testament to the sort of lasting nature of those solutions. I think that still the market is, from my perspective at least, dominated by those folks. Of course, you have the emergence of fund administrators. That wasn't terribly surprising, but it's now in many cases outsourced as a service. And then now there are finally these sort of new, more kind of modern, um, smaller company startup-ish, solutions emerging in private equity accounting. My take on it was always that it's just hard, and so that's why like the incumbents had the market, and why new entrants, didn't have a lot of success, and therefore people just decided, yeah, we'll go hire a fund administrator instead. What's your take on it?
I would agree actually, and that's where you see, time and experience, matters in some respects. It's hard. TNR, you talked about using it in 2005. It had been around for a long time, continuing to add capabilities into the platform. But as you look at it, the different complexities of the relationships of the investments, and dealing with things like side pockets and SPVs and waterfall calculations and IRR calculations in different ways, that change in some cases depending on how you're dealing with them, and some of that really is about experiential in nature. It's not necessarily just here's the formula and that's what it is. And so you do see where some of the incumbents, they just have a lot of time and some of the variance, I would say, versus core baseline tracking of an investment or management fees. When you start talking about more complex waterfall calculations and things of that sort, time kind of matters in that respect. So I would
Yeah.
agree with you. Is it's and it doesn't get necessarily get easier. I think it's an experience that people have to have.
Yeah. Well, and I think the market, certainly over the last 3, 4 years, has become more complex too, with all of the special purpose vehicles and all sorts of creative ways to structure um, transactions, and little to co-invest are so big, so there's all sorts of structure complexities that grow and compound as well, it seems, which I think is good. I routinely say that on sales calls that I'm on. It's like, I sort of never ceases to amaze me the sort of things that people will come up with to raise capital and the strategies that they'll use to deploy them. And I think that for me, one of the cool things about this market is how creative people will be. I'm sure you saw,
Mm-hmm.
very in depth what that looks like implementing the
Oh, yeah.
accounting solutions behind them.
Yeah, no two are exactly alike. So,
Yeah.
which is good. And there's different, asset classes, and you have things like crypto coming up, and the complexities around crypto. There's always going to be something that's going to make that a little bit more complex.
Yeah. What if I gave you a crystal ball, Harold? I said, look into this and tell me what the future looks like. Now, the future you could talk about the weather, you could talk about music, you could talk about anything. But I'm wondering if you have a point of view about where this market continues to go, and some of the trend. You've been around it now for some time. You've been deep into many very interesting pockets. What I really like about you is, the early part of your career, you started in product management. I happen to love the sort of theory and practice of product management, but I think it provides a super interesting viewpoint to then view the kind of the rest of your career. I don't know what's in the crystal ball when I hand it to you. Anything noteworthy?
That's an interesting question, Jeff.
Yeah.
um, I mean, I think there's a lot of things in the crystal ball. I mean, like you said, I think things continue to be challenging, complex, which for people like us that like to solve problems, that's a good thing. In the private equity space, more and more challenging to go out and fundraise with in this environment, and then retain those investors for future fundraising. And haven't figured out how to, communicate with them. So there's a lot of things that are right down our alley in that respect. Um, and I think it just becomes more and more complex. And we talked about data, I think, a little bit earlier. So the other kind of crystal ball is, there's all of this revolves around data and rich data and how we use it and what insights we get from it, and how that's used to run our business and actually ultimately give a return to the people that are counting on getting a return from that. And so focusing on sort of how do we use and manipulate data, how AI plays into that, how all of those things. So I guess coming back around, I'd say that sort of view of the sort of the collection, the managing, the associating of data and then how to actually get intelligence out of that and drive thing is kind of where I see things go.
Yeah, love that. Good answer. I agree with you. All right, last thing, music. You're a drummer.
Uh, yeah, I have been known to play drums here and there, more in my youth than now.
Well, I think that's probably the case for a lot of people. You were lucky. I was the kid that dreamed of having a drum set and didn't. And I'll be honest with you, mom and dad, I don't blame you. I think about my kids, my 7 and 5 year olds. If they were to have it, they've asked for a drum set actually, and it's a hard no for us, unfortunately, for mom. I I think it'd be really cool for me to have a drum set, for them to have a drum set so that I could play. But I certainly would not want to have to deal with um, the drum thing. Um, what we've talked about this a little bit too, but I used to ask this of everybody, and maybe not so much as of late, but I was interested. What's a sort of memory or something that comes to mind immediately about music, whether it's like a song or a band or a concert or a relative who was, what, like when I say music, what comes to mind for you?
Oh, um, honestly, music, what comes to mind for me is sort of memories, and maybe that's a
Mm.
strange thing, but when I hear various different songs, different genres of music, I can remember where I was or what I was doing, kind of when that song was popular, if you will, right? So I go, and my kids, think I'm crazy because, a song will come on the radio and go, I was in sixth grade, when that song was on, and this is what I was doing, right? And this is what was important. So for me, music kind of is a mindset and sort of like brings back good memories of things of that sort. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I love it. It's just, I've heard it before. It said it's sort of the soundtrack of life. There's an artist I'm into right now who just recently released an album, Subtitles for Feelings, which is a cool way to sort of think about music as being subtitles for the things you feel in life. Um, I'm going to dig into that. What is like one song? Like when I hear you say that, what's the song that comes to mind? Like sixth grade or so we just lost, unfortunately, rest in peace, Jimmy Buffett. I think that was a moment for a lot of people. That was the first concert I ever went to. I think I was 12,
Hmm.
13 years old. And yeah, what an experience. But I will never hear a Jimmy Buffett song anywhere at any point without, thinking of, like there's a whole connotation. I don't even know that I could possibly describe it, but certainly
Yeah.
the memory of where I was for that first concert as well. Is there one that jumps out to you? Like,
It's funny that you say that because I was going to say Jimmy Buffett.
I
Um,
figured you kind of were. Yeah.
I'm sort of a parrot head at large. So,
Ooh.
it's interesting. So back to the drums piece. So, me and I have two friends of mine I've been friends with since kindergarten, and we all had drum sets. So we
Mm.
all aspired to be drummers.
A whole
And
menace. You were like a gang in your
oh, we
neighborhood.
were, we were all going to be Neil Peart from Rush. That
Yeah,
was
of course. Yeah.
and actually the one that actually is actually playing in a band and goes and does gigs all the time is a huge parrot head. And I've been a big Jimmy Buffett fan and remember the concerts that we'd go to, particularly my first one, right? Tailgating in the parking lot and all the good things that come with that.
Yeah.
And so, a couple of memories there. He's a huge parrot head. It reminds me of my friends, but also Jimmy Buffett. Just that, and vacationing on the beach, which is never a bad thing.
Yeah. What a guy, huh? I think he did that for a lot of us. Well, Harold, we're thrilled to have you, man. We're lucky. Thrilled to get a chance to work with you on a daily basis, and I know the team is uh, thrilled that you're here and that you bring the experience that you do. Can't thank you enough for joining me, man. I hope that all of the listeners that it's applicable to, whether customers or prospects that will become customers, get a chance to work with you and benefit from your expertise. But thanks for joining me, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. And I really appreciate, the time. But my first 3 months, like I said, coming up to that 3 month anniversary, it's everything kind of expected it to be. So I'm really excited to be working with the team. Love the clients, love the team. The culture is great. So looking forward to great things.
Awesome, man. Thanks again.